The ascent towards the supermind. Is this real? Hello, this is Shores and Infinity Chris speaking with a video about the ascent to the supermind. This is about Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine, but it's not a summary of the chapter. This will follow. This is a general discussion if there is such a thing as the ascent to the supermind, or the ascent of the supermind towards the supermind. So, is the human species as a whole in the process of ascending towards the supermind? So not only towards enlightenment, but even the supermind is very, very, very high stuff. Okay? And he also says that first we have to go through the pass through the overmind. In some chapters of the book he talks about the overmind as Maya, and in some other chapters he uses the supermind for some other meaning. Why? Because in the early years, the Life Divine is one of the first books he wrote. In the early years he was still very much influenced by the Upanishads and the Vedas. It's a good source to be influenced by, but it's still an influence that he hasn't or hadn't verified totally. So UG, for example, always points out that some of this is religious gobbledygook, or maybe they were high on something. There are two paths to awakening and enlightenment. One is the religious, one is the spiritual. Most people mix it up. I don't. I think they are very two distinct paths, and some very few individuals are able to walk both simultaneously. And then it looks to the onlooker or the reader or the student as if it was one path, but it's not. It's two paths. Only some people can do both at the same time. And for example, Meher Baba, Mother Meera, the Mother, Sri Aurobindo, a lot of Indian gurus, they were able to do this. But it's not necessarily the case, and it can be very confusing. On the religious path, as always, there's a lot of faith involved. On the spiritual path, we're not interested in faith, we're interested in truth. Whatever the truth is. Whatever the truth is. Even if it's horrible. Even if it's like Jet says on the other side of Maya, once you exit Maya, you see everything is a boring desert wasteland. Even if that is the truth, on the spiritual path we want to know it, we want to see it, we want to experience it. Just to know if this is true. On the spiritual path it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. It just needs to be cozy. So if you're interested in cozy, comfortable, nice, blissful, joyful, go the religious path. It's not that one path is better or worse than another. But if you can't go both, the religious path is definitely nicer. Definitely. It's much more comfortable. I'm not against the religious path. I'm just saying it's different. It's not the same. So this chapter towards the supermind sounds very, very much like the religious path. There's a lot of conjecture and guesswork, because of course it hasn't happened yet. When he says the human being, the human race, the human species will ascend, will evolve in the direction of the supermind, as we have seen in the last chapter already, then this hasn't happened yet, so he can't have verified it yet. What he can have done is experience this for himself already and then project it upon the whole human species. Only during the early times where he wrote the Synthesis of Yoga and the Life Divine, he wasn't there yet. He was enlightened already, but not fully enlightened, which what we call fully enlightened here on the channel is 700 plus on the Hawkins scale, location 12, 13 plus on the finest locations, and third-tier spiral dynamics, beyond aubergine, beyond clear light. So that is hard to reach, and very few people reach this, although, of course, nowadays a lot of people claim to have reached it, which is almost always wrong, false, deluded. Especially people who claim to have reached 1000. 1000 is unbearable. 1000 is unbearable. Often people who think they're in 1000, they're in location 3. They're on the religious path, which is fine. It's just not the same. Anyway, if this transformation, if this evolving of the human species and human consciousness were to happen, it would happen slowly. And it seems it is happening. It seems it is happening. The last 150 years, things shifted. And horrible stuff always was fuel to this transformation. The First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War, the pandemic a few years ago. Those fueled the transformation. Sometimes a smith needs a fire to forge his new weapon. First, though, we have to develop our vital and mental bodies. This is not what most people are doing. Most people are staying in their gross physical body and deny that there's anything else. So as a species, we're far away from it. There are a lot of people who are interested in that. Between 1 and 10%, although most people don't take it really seriously, and they're also more on the religious path and think that Hatha yoga and meditation is spiritual in itself. It's not. More is necessary. More is necessary. Let go, let go, let go. Not find new identifications and attachments, but let go. No matter if you're on the religious path, just had a sip of tea, no matter if you're on the religious path or the spiritual path or both, letting go is always the thing. Surrender. Not exchanging old belief sets for new belief sets. That doesn't work. Has never worked and will never work. Once we have accustomed ourselves, reconnected with the vital body, the mental body, the intuition, and started to practice this letting go of attachments and brainwashing, then the overmind layer comes, and this is, in my view, how I read it, Maya giving us a free pass, letting us through. Say, okay, you're not 100% deluded and blinded anymore by my illusions. You may pass on. And afterwards, the supermind. These are all translation problems. Yeah? Sri Aurobindo has these terms, borrowed these terms from the Upanishads and Vedas, and substituted the Sanskrit names, some Sanskrit names, with English names, like mental, overmind, supermind, all this mind stuff. But it's tricky to translate it like that. It creates misunderstandings because, anyway, in the West we think that consciousness and intelligence is the same, which it is not. So to talk about mind and mental all the time, but meaning something else than the logical, analytical mind, is for the Western mind not understandable. So it would have been nice to choose another word. The whole chapter 26 here is very Hegelian. It sounds very much like Hegel would have wrote it. I mean, Sri Aurobindo did work on it later, edited the chapters later again and again and again. But this one, I think, needs some serious editing, or would have needed. He says it is an indispensable step towards overcoming this difficulty is the opening up of the inner being and all its centers of action. What does this mean? The inner being. What is the inner being now? And what are the centers of action? Well, there are a lot of things that we call chakras, for example, that need to be aligned and ready. And then you need to feel them if they're ready and aligned. There's a lot of, if you open up to developing the vital bodies and the mental bodies, a lot of energy, so to say, let's call it energy, to make it not more difficult than necessary. A lot of energy is coming in. This can be very, very uncomfortable, especially if you're going towards that full enlightenment. There's third tier spiral dynamics, 700 plus on the Hawkins scale and so on. Which is basically the first color in the first tier is beige, the first color in the second tier is yellow, and there is no name for the first color of the third tier. But these stages, beige, yellow, and 3.1, they're very uncomfortable because everything is new. It's a stage of alignment, of disorientation and new orientation. And if your inner energy centers, like the chakras and the granthis and so on, the discs that are turning in knots, and the nadis, which are the acupuncture channels and so on, if this energetical system is not in flow and empty, then it cannot take all the new energy. You have to rid yourself of old stagnant energy to be able to take in new, more subtle energy. Otherwise it's super uncomfortable. Everyone I know who went there confirms that it's super uncomfortable. It's not really a nice place. As I said, if you want nice, go the religious path. Don't go towards the possible transformation of the supermind, towards the supermind. Of course, we want to find out. Those truth seekers like you and me, we want to find out if this is true. So we want to find out by ourselves. We're not into believing what anyone wrote, not even Sri Aurobindo or Meher Baba, or Jet or UG or whoever, Sri, whatever. We want to know this ourselves by experience. We want to verify it ourselves. It's not enough just to read about it. Actually, it's dangerous to read about it, as Jet always points out, because then you think you're already on the path by reading books. You're not on the path by reading books. You averted going on the path by reading books. Because instead of looking inside, you're reading a book and saying, that sounds good. Oh, yeah, I agree or I disagree. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. Only the experience matters. Go inside. Stop reading books. Stop listening to videos and podcasts. Go inside and try to confirm it. And don't look for a specific experience. You will not have the same experiences as Jesus or Buddha or Mohammed or Krishna or Lao Tzu or Socrates or Jet or Sri Aurobindo or whoever your favorite guru or anti-guru is. It will not be the same. It will be similar to some degree, but not be the same. So don't look for a specific experience. Just be open to everything that comes. And then you can always drop a mail or join me on Patreon, and then we can exchange experiences. That is very, very helpful. I found that one of the most helpful things to exchange experiences, it will prevent a slipping into megalomania. And those who do not exchange experience, who stay in their own little bubble, they all go crazy sooner or later. They all think they're suddenly Jesus, or calibrating at Hawkins scale 1000, which is not the case. Especially those religious nuts. They always think they have reached the highest point of consciousness ever. The last thing I want to touch about today, the rest will come in another video, is that Sri Aurobindo writes that in these higher states of consciousness, they're more visual. The visual aspect is much stronger and prominent than the mental aspect. The mental aspect is going down and down and down. There's less and less thinking happening. It's not a cognitive process, the transformation and enlightenment. It has nothing to do with thoughts. There are higher faculties of the mind involved, but they do very little thinking. It's direct knowledge and intuition all the time. You just download direct knowledge. It's not that you're thinking, pondering, mulling about it. But what he says is that many of these experiences are more visual. You see stuff. And I'm not sure about that. I think that varies from person to person. There are people for whom this is more visual, and Sri Aurobindo was obviously one of them. He talks about light a lot. Light and enlightenment, light shows, light experiences, showers of light. And others have experienced this as well. This may be one of the reasons why it's called enlightenment. And this is stronger on the religious path than on the spiritual path, but can happen in both. And some of the people who walked both paths, I'm not sure if they were aware of that. I'm not sure if Sri Aurobindo was aware that he was walking both paths. I think Meher Baba was, but Sri Aurobindo and the mother, I'm not sure. Because they always said they didn't want to start a religion, but yet they said a lot of things and did a lot of things that were religious, and now in India they're treated a lot, their teachings is treated a lot like a religion. So this seeing lights and everything can happen, but doesn't have to happen. And it's more likely to happen on the religious path, which itself has many different steps. It's not one thing, it has several steps. And the higher aspects, the higher levels of the religious path are very, very interesting. So again, I'm not against it. Someone recently wrote, it doesn't seem to have worked for you. It worked for me, no problem. It's just not what I want. I want the truth. I want to see behind all the veils until I find the last one. That's interesting for me. Well, not interesting. That's the only thing that still has any compelling draw, pull. Now, at some point the search is over and you need a new motivation, and to look behind the last veil is the last motivation. Otherwise, why go on? Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching, listening, subscribing, joining me on Patreon, writing mails to me, being interactive, and of course, thank you very much to all those who have already joined me on Patreon. Thank you very much.